All right, welcome to another deep dive. And today we're going deep into the world of prototyping.
Ooh, prototype.
Yeah, we've got our stack of articles and notes here ready to go, and we're going to try to distill all that down for you
Sounds good.
into the most important insights about prototyping. By the end of this deep dive, you should understand not only what prototypes are, but why they're so crucial in, well, really any sort of digital product development. And you'll get a sense of the different levels of detail that prototyping can involve. So whether you're the person building the next killer app, or you're designing a website, or you're really just curious about the process,
Yeah.
this is going to be a really valuable deep dive for you.
What I think is so cool about prototyping is it's almost like you get to test drive your ideas before you invest tons of time and energy
Oh, that's a great way to put it.
into building like the final product.
It's like creating a blueprint for a house, right? You wouldn't just start building a house without a blueprint. So why would you dive headfirst into building an app or a website without first creating a prototype?
Exactly. And, I think a lot of people think that prototyping is just about like catching errors early on,
Sure.
which it definitely is, but it goes way beyond that. Prototyping helps you to validate your ideas right from the start.
Okay.
Like, does this app actually solve a problem? Are people actually going to want to use this? You get to answer those questions before you've even written, a single line of code.
That's such a good point. I like that. It's like testing a recipe before you bake the entire cake.
Yeah,
A little taste test could save you a lot of wasted ingredients.
exactly. And beyond that, I think it's also just about collaboration. Having a prototype gives everybody on the team, whether you're a designer, a developer, a marketer,
Right.
everybody can look at that prototype, that same thing, and be on the same page about it.
So it's like having a common language that everybody can speak. That makes a lot of sense. Now, you mentioned, or in your notes, I see that there are different levels of detail when it comes to prototyping. What's I think there's like a technical term for it, right?
Yeah, we call it fidelity.
Fidelity.
And fidelity just refers to how closely the prototype resembles the final product. So a low-fidelity prototype might be something as simple as a hand-drawn sketch,
Okay.
whereas a high-fidelity prototype might look and feel almost exactly like the real deal.
So it's a spectrum, right? It goes from like rough ideas to polished, interactive
So that is-
experiences. And each one kind of serves a different purpose.
Absolutely. Think of it like this. You wouldn't use a hammer to screw in a light bulb.
Right.
You choose the right tool for the job. And similarly, the level of fidelity that you choose to your prototype really depends on what you're trying to achieve at that stage of development.
So let's unpack these different levels then.
Yeah.
Starting with low fidelity prototyping.
Okay.
What exactly does that entail, and why is it so valuable?
So low-fidelity prototyping, it's all about speed and simplicity.
Okay.
So think hand-drawn sketches, basic diagrams, even just like, Post-it notes on a whiteboard.
Oh, wow.
It's really just about getting your initial ideas out of your head and into some sort of tangible form that you can then share and discuss with others.
So capturing like the essence of the idea without getting too bogged down in the details. I
Yeah.
find often that sketching things out just helps me think more clearly, especially like in those early stages of a project.
Totally, and that's a really key point. Low-fidelity prototyping isn't about perfection, it's about progress.
Yeah.
It's about testing your assumptions early on and getting feedback before you invest, too much time in a particular direction.
You've mentioned feedback a couple times now.
Yeah.
Why is it so crucial to the prototyping process, especially at this early stage?
Because feedback helps you to identify any potential issues or areas for improvement before they become, these major roadblocks in the process. Even with just a very simple sketch, you can show it to a few potential users and say, does this make sense to you? Can you imagine yourself using this? And their response can be really, really valuable.
One of the articles that you sent me mentioned a startup that was developing a task management app, and they created a very basic prototype. It was just like some index cards that represented tasks and different boards that represented projects.
Cool.
And they just tested it with potential users that way. And they found that users could intuitively understand the concept and manage their tasks really easily just using that simple system.
That's awesome.
Which I thought that was a really cool example of how even a low-fidelity prototype can just yield such valuable insights that help them validate their core concept before they even started building the actual app.
Exactly. And that's one of the, I think, main benefits of starting with low fidelity.
Yeah.
Is that it allows you to fail fast and iterate quickly.
So it's like embracing that your first idea might not be the best idea.
Totally.
And that's okay.
Yeah, you're constantly experimenting and refining. Yeah, based on what you learn.
And the beauty of low fidelity is it's just so quick and easy to iterate, right? Like you can make a change to a sketch in just a few seconds.
Totally.
And that really encourages you to just experiment and explore different options.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we've established that low fidelity prototyping is all about, getting those initial ideas down, testing your assumptions, getting that early feedback. But what happens when we want to add more detail, more interactivity? That's where mid-fidelity prototyping comes in, right?
Exactly. Think of mid-fidelity as that bridge between those rough sketches and the polished final product.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Let's dive into the world of mid-fidelity prototyping when we come back for part 2 of this deep dive. All right, welcome back to the deep dive.
Yeah.
So we're picking up where we left off, exploring the world of prototyping and moving from those initial sketches now into the realm of mid-fidelity prototyping.
Yeah.
So what exactly changes when we sort of step up to this level?
Mid-fidelity prototyping is where we start breathing life into those static sketches and they become interactive.
Okay.
So imagine being able to actually click through the flow of an app,
Right.
test out different navigation options, get a real feel for how that product will work, all before you've written a single line of code.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
So instead of just visualizing like the layout and the basic structure, we can actually start to test the usability and the flow of the product.
Exactly. And this is where tools like Figma and Envision really come in.
Okay.
These platforms allow you to create these clickable prototypes, add basic animations, and even kind of simulate those user interactions.
I've heard of those tools. Those are pretty popular in the design world.
Yeah.
I can see how those would be incredibly helpful for creating those more interactive, realistic prototypes.
Totally.
What about content? Are we still using like placeholder text at this stage, or do things get a little bit more real?
Yeah. So this is where we start to ditch the lorem ipsum
Yeah.
and actually start incorporating real content.
Okay.
So think about it. If you're testing like an e-commerce app,
Right.
it's way more helpful for the user to see actual product names and descriptions and prices rather than just, some generic placeholder.
That makes a lot of sense.
It really gives them a much clearer understanding of how that app will work in a real-world context.
It's like the difference between reading a script and then actually seeing a play like come to life on stage.
Yeah.
The real content just adds that layer of like context
Totally.
that really helps those users to provide more meaningful feedback.
Exactly.
Now, as we're adding detail, are there things that we should prioritize over others?
So one of the key things to focus on at this stage is the primary navigation.
Okay.
Can users easily find their way around the product?
Right.
Can they access those core features without getting lost?
Okay.
This is where you can really start to refine that user experience and ensure that it's, intuitive and enjoyable.
So we're moving beyond just testing the concept.
Yeah.
Now we're starting to actually like fine-tune the actual usability of the product, which I can see how that would be valuable, especially when you're testing with real users who might not be familiar with the product.
Absolutely. And, sometimes you uncover these unexpected issues with even something as simple as the login flow.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I remember we were working on a project and we were testing a mid-fidelity prototype of an app, and we found that people were constantly getting confused about where to enter their password.
Wow, that's interesting. Seems like such a basic thing.
Yeah, I know.
But I guess a small design flaw like that can really trip people up.
Totally. And that's why prototyping at this level is so crucial.
Yeah.
You're catching those usability issues before they become, costly problems down the line.
And like with low fidelity prototyping, it's still all about iteration, right? You test, you get feedback, you refine, you repeat the process until you feel confident
Got it.
in the user experience.
It's just a continuous cycle of improvement.
Yeah.
And each iteration brings you closer to a product that really meets the needs of your users.
Okay, so we've gone from rough sketches to clickable prototypes with real content.
Right.
What is the next step in this prototyping journey?
Yeah.
What happens when we want to take things to that next level of polish and refinement?
That's where high-fidelity prototyping comes in.
Okay.
Think of it as the final dress rehearsal before that product launches on the big stage.
I like that analogy. So if mid-fidelity is about refining the user experience, high-fidelity is about perfecting the presentation.
Exactly.
All right, let's delve into all the nuances of high-fidelity prototyping when we come back for the final part of this deep dive.
Welcome back to the deep dive. We've gone from those rough sketches through the world of mid-fidelity prototyping, and now we've arrived at, I guess, the pinnacle.
Yeah.
High-fidelity prototype.
Yeah.
It's like we've taken a rough diamond and polished it to a brilliant shine. What makes this level so special? High-fidelity prototyping is where your product really starts to come to life.
Okay.
It's about creating an experience that looks and feels almost indistinguishable from that final polished product.
Wow.
So think about like all those sleek animations that you see in really well-designed apps.
Right.
All those subtle micro-interactions that kind of delight the user.
Yeah.
And the visual consistency that really builds a strong brand identity. That's what high-fidelity prototyping is all about.
So it sounds like we're really moving beyond just like the functionality.
Yeah.
Now we're focusing on creating an experience that's not just usable, but also like enjoyable, even aesthetically pleasing.
You got it.
Yeah.
And while usability is still super important, high-fidelity prototyping allows you to really fine-tune all those little details
Okay.
that really elevate a good product to a great product. So this is where you're like really meticulously selecting the right color palette.
Right.
Typography, imagery, to try to evoke those desired emotions and reinforce your brand identity.
I can see how this would be so crucial for products where that visual appeal is like a major selling point, right? Like like fashion apps,
Yeah.
design software, games.
Yeah.
But isn't there a risk though of getting like maybe carried away with those visuals
Wow.
and then kind of overlooking the functionality?
That is a great point.
Yeah.
And it's something to be really mindful of.
Okay.
High-fidelity prototyping should never come at the expense of usability.
Right.
In fact, it's kind of the opposite.
Okay.
By creating a prototype that so closely mimics that final product,
Right.
you can conduct really, really thorough usability testing
Yeah.
and identify any sort of lingering issues
Right.
before you move into like full-blown development.
It's like giving the product one final test drive before it hits the showroom floor.
Exactly.
I like that.
And one aspect that becomes like especially important at this stage is accessibility. So, can people with visual impairments easily navigate your product?
Right.
Is the font size like large enough? Does the color contrast meet those accessibility standards?
Right.
These are all like really critical considerations that can be thoroughly tested and addressed during this high-fidelity prototyping phase.
That's a great reminder that, good design is
Yeah.
inclusive design.
Cool.
That's not just about making things, look pretty. It's about making sure that everyone can access and enjoy the experience.
For sure.
Before we wrap up this whole deep dive, I want to kind of revisit this concept of continuous prototyping.
Okay.
It seems like prototyping isn't just a one-time phase.
Yeah.
It's really an ongoing process throughout that entire product lifecycle.
You're absolutely right. Continuous prototyping means that you're constantly learning,
Okay.
iterating, and refining based on that user feedback,
Right.
even after that product is launched.
So like even after an app is, released on the App Store,
Yeah.
those updates that you get, like they're often including new features or bug fixes or improvements based on like what developers are learning from how people are actually using the product.
Exactly. It's like the product is never truly finished.
Yeah.
It's always evolving
Right.
and adapting based on what we learn along the way.
That's a pretty exciting way to think about product development, I think.
It is exciting. And this actually ties into some of the like really amazing trends that are shaping the future of prototyping.
Okay.
So imagine things like AI-powered design tools
Right.
that can analyze user data
Wow.
and suggest improvements to your prototypes, or
Oh, wow.
even creating like immersive AR and VR prototypes that allow people to actually interact with a product
Wow.
in like a virtual environment before it even exists in the real world.
That's amazing.
The possibilities are really mind-blowing.
It sounds like the future of prototyping is all about like blending human creativity with the power of technology to create experiences that are not just functional,
Right.
but delightful, maybe even magical.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
Now, before we go,
Yeah.
what's like the one key takeaway that you hope our listeners walk away with?
I think the biggest takeaway is this. Prototyping isn't just like a step in the process. It's really a mindset.
Okay.
It's about embracing experimentation, iteration, continuous improvement.
Right.
It's about bringing your ideas to life,
Yeah.
testing them out in the real world, and learning from every step of that journey.
It's not about being perfect. It's about making progress.
Well said.
So whether you are designing a website or planning a vacation or even trying a new recipe, embrace the power of prototyping.
Yeah.
You won't be surprised at what you create.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of prototyping.
Yeah.
Hope you found it insightful and inspiring.
Until next time, keep those ideas flowing and those prototypes coming.